Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and this is Coffee and Wisdom. This week, we've been looking at a concept in Western philosophy called the self and other. Today, I want to do a little bit of building onto that and kind of show the bridge that does occur between continental philosophy that most people don't know all that much about in the United States, and then how it gets into really a very popular part of our conversation about what identity and selfhood means. This is the entrance to L'Imago, which does figure prominently in the existentialist movement after the Second World War, still very much a literary and philosophical hub in Paris today, and it figures prominently in the story that I want to tell. Now, to quickly recap, because no, these ideas are not all that simple, I want to go back to Edmund Husserl, who took the concept of the other from the work of Hegel and then expands it. It was just kind of embedded in Hegel with some very other kinds of ideas. But Husserl, who founded something called phenomenology, said that this is a center of the way we experience the world, is self and other. So I consider myself to have a self, and everything else outside of me then is some kind of something else. And that's our experience of reality. And then from that, we build groups, and us and them. And these are very central to our ways of thinking, but we need to examine them because they are also ways that we do damage to other human beings and other groups. That's the idea. Now, Emmanuel Lebanon, who died in 1995, carried this idea into more contemporary times. Levinas was very much about how to encounter the other. One of his famous phrases is, "Thou shalt not kill," is the first word of the human face. So the human face has one of the 10 commandments built right onto it because of this idea of how to encounter the other, not from fear or suspicion, but from wanting to understand the other. Levinas said this: "If one could possess, grasp, and know the other, it would not be other." So the idea here is that, yes, you must respect the boundaries of the other. And even as we try to understand the other, that being people, yes, but also animals and the planet itself. Now, a little bit earlier than that, Martin Buber, who died in 1965, had written a book that is still read today, I and Thou. He was coming out of a Jewish mystical tradition, but really trying to deal with the same idea. Buber began writing before Husserl's The Other formulation became even part of the philosophical conversation. So Buber called his idea dialogical existentialism, whereas Levinas called his idea the encounter. So Buber describes the sphere between two selves. The idea here is that we've got the meeting of two selves, and this is a sphere, and this is a sphere, and then between them, they can create another sphere by bridging that with dialogical attentiveness, as Buber calls it. That is, listening to each other talk. What a concept, right? So this is the way the I-thou idea of Buber works. It objectifies people and things, the other, and it operates from the past, our experiences, our judgments, and our prejudices. The I-it, or the I-he, the I-she, the I-they. Now, I-thou, on the other hand, is a relationship or encounter. It operates in the present opening possibility. That is, we are actually with another person talking in this particular instance. And so we are creating possibility instead of rehashing and reliving past prejudices. Now, this idea does, as I mentioned, come somewhat from old mystical Judaism. The Baal Shem Tov, one of the great rabbis, said this: "Your fellow man is your mirror. If your own face is clean, the image you perceive will also be flawless. But should you look upon your fellow man and see a blemish, it is your own imperfection that you are encountering. You are being shown what it is that you must correct within yourself." Again, very profound idea that what we find most irritating about others is probably what we find most concerning about ourselves in some way. So that's the Baal Shem Tov's idea that goes into a mystical Jewish understanding of how people and things interrelate. So in contemporary terms, nowadays, we talk about encounters that they can go a couple of different ways. One is fight, flight, which is an I-it response, according to Buber, and a tend befriend, which is an I-thou. So you can fight, flight, or you can decide to attend and befriend and learn from this encounter. That's the way we talk about it today in psychological terms, and that thing that develops is called intersubjectivity. Something that happens between two subjectivities that then exists between them. And this is in some way getting at a larger truth. Now, I want to back up a little bit and really look at the way this idea of the other enters into the more popular understanding of how interactions work. And the key to that is Simone de Beauvoir, 1908 to 1986, a French existential philosopher. Here she is pictured with her longtime companion, Jean-Paul Sartre. They had an on-again, off-again relationship, love-hate relationship, argued, disagreed, were completely opposite very often in philosophical ideas, yet they stuck together and enjoyed each other's company. They held court at La Deux Margot and a lot of the time. And in Paris today, they are buried side by side in the cemetery. So they had quite a relationship over time. Sartre and his philosophy remains very much a patriarchal understanding of the world, and Simone de Beauvoir is exactly the opposite in that idea, as we shall see. The book that really brought this idea into popular consciousness was The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, published in 1949. You notice the title of her introduction, Woman as Other. And this is where this really comes into the popular consciousness, at least among educated people who are like Betty Friedan, who are looking at how can we deal with women, feminism, etc. So this is her introduction, a little bit of it. For a long time, I have hesitated to write a book on woman. The subject is irritating, especially to women, and it is not new. Enough ink has been spilled in quarreling over feminism, and perhaps we should say no more about it. It is still talked about, however, for the voluminous nonsense uttered during the last century seems to have done little to illuminate the problem. After all, is there a problem? And if so, what is it? Are there women really? One wonders if women still exist, if they will exist, always exist, whether or not it is desirable that they should, what place they occupy in this world, and what their place should be. So you see how this is operating. She's going to question the very concepts of femininity. And this book is really credited with beginning second wave feminism, again, 1949. A couple of quotes from her. I wish that every human life might be pure, transparent freedom. That is, by golly, the wish for existentialists in general, and certainly what Beauvoir is shooting at with her book, The Second Sex. Yeah, pure, transparent freedom, and that would be the ability of all of us to get outside our own selves, the shell, the walls, and actually talk with the other. Man is defined as a human being and a woman as a female. Whenever she behaves as a human being, she is said to imitate the male. Very famous quote, and again, really focusing in on the concept of the other. And this idea has been used in a lot of discussions of identity. Who gets to be a human being, and then who has to be labeled something else. And of course, this is eventually, 60 years later, ends up in the idea of whiteness and white supremacy. She also said one's life has value so long as one attributes value to the life of others by means of love, friendship, indignation, and compassion. You see, that's coming straight out of the ideas of Levinas, who was also living in Paris and would have been having coffee and cigarettes over there at the cafe. I want to look at a little more closely at the conclusion to the second sex, because it really sends us into ideas that became very important in second wave feminism, and we still kick around in our various cultures today. It is nonsense to assert that revelry, vice, ecstasy, passion would become impossible if man and woman were equal in concrete matters. The contradictions that put the flesh in opposition to the spirit, the instant to time, the swoon of immanence to the challenge of transcendence, the absolute of pleasure to the nothingness of forgetting, will never be resolved. And sexuality will always be materialized the tension, the anguish, the joy, the frustration, and the triumph of existence. To emancipate woman is to refuse to confine her to the relations she bears to man, not to deny them to her. Let her have her independent existence, and she will continue nonetheless to exist for him also, mutually recognizing each other as subject. Each will yet remain for the other an other. The reciprocity of the relations will not do away with the miracles, desire, possession, love, dream, adventure, worked by the division of human beings into two separate categories. And the words that move us, giving, conquering, united, will not lose their meaning. So you don't have anything to lose, patriarchy, by treating women as human beings, is the point of the thing. Her most famous quote of all is, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." Again, the idea here is about socialization of what it meant to be woman. And here she is on the front of Time magazine back in 1949, called a foundational feminist. So Simone de Beauvoir, how she took the idea of the other into a totally different direction that's still very much with us today. Thanks so much. I'll do some summarizing and bring it on into the 21st century tomorrow. Thanks for listening. And this is our theme for the month of February, Beloved Community. And on Sunday, I'll be talking about putting in the human and taking out the ism in humanism. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk again tomorrow.